I never believed in the old stories, but now I wish I had. As a park ranger, I've heard all kinds of wild tales about Yellowstone: Bigfoot sightings, ghostly apparitions, and even strange disappearances that locals like to attribute to the park's ancient secrets. I always laughed them off, chalking it up to overactive imaginations and tall tales. But the deeper you go into Yellowstone's backcountry, the more you start to wonder what's real and what isn't. I was assigned to patrol one of the more remote sections of the park. It was a forgotten area, barely mapped, and avoided even by the veteran rangers. The trees there were ancient, twisted, and gnarled, as if they had borne witness to things no one should ever see. The canopy was so dense that even on a bright day, sunlight barely pierced through, leaving a perpetual twilight that wrapped around you like a cold shroud. It started subtly. The first time I felt something was off, I was hiking a trail that hadn't seen any foot traffic in years. The air was thick and humid, and the usual sounds of the forest, birds, insects, the rustle of leaves, were conspicuously absent. I could hear my own breathing, my boots crunching on the pine needles, but nothing else. It was as if the forest was holding its breath. Then I noticed the markings. At first I thought they were claw marks on the trees, deep gouges that ran the length of several trunks in a jagged, unsettling pattern. But as I looked closer, I realized they weren't claw marks. They were symbols, carved with a precision that couldn't have been made by any animal. They resembled spirals and crude figures, almost like stick figures with elongated limbs. I took a photo, planning to ask the local historians about it later, but something about those symbols left a strange chill in my spine. I decided to keep moving, figuring it was probably just some strange Native American carving. Maybe a warning, I thought. I should have heeded it. As I moved deeper into the woods, the temperature dropped sharply, like I had walked into a meat locker. My breath clouded in front of me, even though it was midsummer. A faint smell hit me then, something earthy, wet, and tinged with a metallic scent I couldn't place. It was nauseating, like rotting vegetation mixed with rusted iron. I felt an instinctive urge to turn back, but I pushed forward, convincing myself it was just the forest playing tricks on me. Then I heard it. A whisper, soft and barely discernible, threading through the trees like a gentle breeze. I froze, straining my ears. It came again, a faint murmur in a language I couldn't understand. I called out, asking if someone was there, but the forest swallowed my voice, offering only silence in return. I walked faster, my senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle of leaves felt like it was creeping closer. My heart pounded as I quickened my pace, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. The forest began to close in around me, the trees pressing closer, their branches clawing at my jacket as if trying to hold me back. Finally, I broke into a small clearing. Relief washed over me until I saw the figure. It stood across from me, just at the edge of the tree line, half hidden in shadow. It was tall, easily 7 feet, with a hunched posture that made it look unnatural, as if it had too many joints or none at all. Its eyes glowed a dull red in the twilight, locking onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. It looked vaguely human, but distorted, stretched, as if someone had taken a man and twisted him into something else. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. The creature took a step forward, moving with a strange, fluid grace. It bared its teeth, a grim, unsettling smile that stretched across its face far too wide. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet as I turned and ran, not daring to look back. As I tore through the forest, I heard it again, the whispering, louder this time, echoing all around me, bouncing from tree to tree. It sounded like laughter, hollow and mocking, chasing me through the twisted trees. Shadows darted in the corners of my vision, but whenever I turned, there was nothing. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, twisting and writhing, pushing me further into its depths. Eventually, I burst out onto a path I didn't recognize. My radio crackled, and I desperately called for help, but all I got was static. The trees seemed to loom over me, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, and the sky was an impenetrable black. I stumbled forward, hearing footsteps behind me now, heavy and deliberate, matching my pace. I kept running until I saw a flicker of light up ahead, a small, dilapidated cabin I hadn't seen before. I didn't question it. I just ran inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The cabin was empty, dust and cobwebs hanging thickly from the rafters, but I felt a small sense of safety, a thin barrier between me and whatever was out there. I could still hear the creature outside, its footsteps circling the cabin, slow and measured. It was toying with me, drawing out the fear. The whispers filled the cabin, pressing in on me from all sides. I could feel it. A dark presence just beyond the door, waiting. Then I saw the markings on the walls, the same symbols I had seen on the trees, only these were older, fainter, as if they had been there for decades. I traced one with my finger, and a sharp chill shot through me, like ice piercing my veins. It was then that I realized I wasn't the first to come here. Others had sought refuge in this cabin, leaving their mark as a warning, or perhaps a plea for help that never came. The door creaked, and I held my breath. The creature was closer now, its shadow flickering through the cracks in the wood. I could hear its breathing, slow and deliberate, almost in time with my own pounding heartbeat. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall, and waited. Seconds stretched into eternity as I stared at the door, waiting for it to burst open, for the creature to come for me. But it never did. Instead, the whispers grew softer, fading into silence. The footsteps retreated, the presence outside slipping away into the darkness. I waited, holding my breath, until finally, all I heard was my own ragged breathing. I don't know how long I stayed there, too afraid to move. Eventually, I forced myself to step outside. The forest was silent again, the air thick with an uneasy stillness. I walked back, keeping my eyes forward, never looking back. They found me near the trailhead the next day, disoriented, exhausted, but alive. I told my supervisor I had gotten lost, that I hadn't seen anything unusual. But when I turned to leave, he put a hand on my shoulder, his face grim. "Be careful in those woods," he said, a note of warning in his voice. "Some things out there aren't meant to be found." I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't need the warning. The forest had marked me, the symbols burned into my memory, the creature's eyes seared into my mind. And even now, late at night, I hear the whispers, soft, beckoning, calling me back to the forest, back to where the shadows live and the trees remember.